All right, people, welcome back. We are here with another episode of the official Talkin TV podcast after we took a break last week. And the next installment of what I've liked to been calling this summer, which is Blockbuster TV Summer. We've been recapping The Boys and House of the Dragon up until this point, where we're adding another installment to cap off the month of June, that being season 3 of The Bear, which dropped all 10 of its episodes this past Wednesday night. I just finished it. I believe Luke just finished it as well. Man, chef, you ready to chef away?
It is definitely time to cook.
Yes, indeed. All of that.
Unlike The Acolyte, which I have not been watching.
Oh, we'll be saving our ribbing for The Acolyte later on in this episode. What's it called? For those of you also who are tuning into the audio feed of this as well, the recaps of House of the Dragon and The Boys will premiere right after this. All of this and more on today's episode of the Talkin TV podcast. What's going on, guys? Happy Sunday morning. Back in the Sunday morning slot just for today. More than likely, we'll see if we actually keep this for the rest of the recaps, at least until the recaps are done in early August. But Luke, I know you're not as big of a TV watcher as me, but it's been a rough year. Well, I mean, it's been a rough year for everything, really. But, to the point where Hollywood is questioning its own existence even more than before. But yeah, it's been a rough year for TV, to say the least, after everything ended last year. And we've gotten a couple good installments, Shogun 3 Body Problem, X-Men 97 was a very, very big surprise. We got the last 4 episodes of Invincible, which were pretty great. But yeah, so we found ourselves in this weird spot. Specifically, it feels like just for this month. I know I've said Blockbuster TV Summer, but it really has been for a majority of June because a lot of these shows are only going to be around for like another couple of weeks or so, where we had the return of The Boys, House of the Dragon this past month. We had the premiere of The Acolyte, the latest Star Wars show, which you and I talked about for all of 5 minutes at the beginning of the month while it was still relevant. It's only gotten, unfortunately, more relevant. I don't necessarily know if for the reasons that it deserves, but we also have the return of The Bear, which has been around for the shortest amount of time, shorter than any of these shows. I believe it premiered only like 2 months before House of the Dragon. But unlike House of the Dragon, which is only now returned for its second season 2 years after its premiere, The Bear has been kind of satisfying us in terms of actually, being the TV that we used to love, which is, actually releasing a new season every year. And so this show really has turned into the little show that could, in terms of it kind of came out of nowhere in the summer of 2022, dropped all 8 of its episodes, starring Jeremy Allen White, who was famous for years for his portrayal of Lip Gallagher on Shameless. It's kind of the younger, cocky bad boy. And now this show comes along and kind of shows he's a little bit older. He's a little bit of an adult. And what were your expectations going into this show when you first heard about it, when it first premiered?
There, I fixed my mic input from before. I don't think I watched it when it first came out. New show wasn't that popular. Like I heard about it. Maybe I even watched the first episode, but it wasn't until season 2 came around that I actually fully watched it. I watched it, and then I enjoyed it. But then season 2 was like a big step up. So then when season 3 was coming out, I was eagerly anticipating it, and it lived up to what I was waiting for. So. Great cast, so many like actors popping up. It's kind of the show, like I feel like actors are really like demanding, like, can I get in this anyhow, like even like for 2 seconds, like even in the season there's an episode in the middle which we'll talk about. So yeah, it's just such an easy show to enjoy. Like
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, so this show was one of those ones where I was looking for like kind of, the upcoming shows, because the summer is usually sometimes when we start to get some premieres of the new show. So after the spring of 2022, where Ozark had wrapped up, Severance had wrapped up, what's it called? We hadn't had Succession for a minute. Barry and Better Call Saul were just wrapping up their runs as well. So I was kind of looking forward to being like, okay, what are we looking forward to for this summer for 2022? And I saw the trailer for the show. I'm like, okay, Jeremy Allen White, I like him. The show looks interesting enough. It looks very fast paced. It looks very intense. I'm like, okay, that's usually a surefire way to my heart. And so, but it was on FX and Hulu. This was right around the time when obviously Fox and its subsidiary FX had been owned by Disney for a couple years by this point. But this was when the first talks of the Hulu Disney merger were beginning to happen. And so Hulu was still its own thing at the time. Now, of course, it's all on one big happy Disney family. But at the time, Hulu was its own thing. So I'm like, okay, is this like Hulu trying to directly compete with Netflix? Because what's it called? Because yeah, I was not sure whether I was really not sure whether what's it called? I really wasn't sure kind of what their approach was here, what their strategy was. I'm like, are they trying to directly compete with Netflix? Because Hulu had tried this approach before and it really hadn't worked. And for the most part, they were still doing the week-to-week drops that a lot of streamers were doing. But they chose to drop all 8 episodes in the same day. And I'm like, okay. And I started watching the first episode. I'm like, oh, these are short too. They're only like 30 to, I think the longest one was 40 minutes each. The 7th episode, I think, didn't even make a full 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then just the style of it, I'm like, what is this? I have never seen a show like this. It takes place in the back of a kitchen at like a failing Chicago sandwich shop. Everybody's shouting, everybody's screaming. The editing is so fast paced. It's kind of like the perfect Gen Z show because I'm like, oh my God, the editing is so fast and frantic and all over the place. It's impossible to lose somebody's attention. And the first season, I would definitely define it chaotically good. It was definitely still trying to find its stride and figure out kind of what its identity was. You know, it had a very, very strong start, but I kind of equated similarly enough to the start of The Boys, where it had a very, very strong identity of what it wanted to be, even if it was still kind of trying to iron out the kinks. I wasn't a fan of a lot of the supporting characters. I really wasn't sure kind of what the approach was, but the acting was good, like really, really good. Like really, really good, because aside Jeremy Allen White, this is obviously our introduction to Iowa Debary, who is now taken over the world. Eben Moss Backrack, who've been acting in things for years. This was finally his big breakout role. And
Cousin,
exactly.
Cousin, I'm made of rocks now.
And all the supporting players as well that they got, who are now kind of like, staples of the show. I'm like, that was a good, solid season, but there was a lot of problems with it. It did not make my top 10 of that year. And 2022 was already a pretty loaded year for TV to begin with, unfortunately, as that was kind of the beginning of the end and the wrap up of a ton of shows that we kind of been with for the last like 4 or 5 years, And so I finished the first 8 episodes, and then a year later, I'm living in New York City, and the second season drops in the middle of summer of 2023, which, like I said, was one of the greatest content summers of our lives in recent memory. And I started watching it, kind of having like tempered expectations after the first season, and I was like, okay. I was like, this is within the first episode. I was like, okay, this is going to be something cool. This is they fixed the problems that I've had with the first season, and this is going to be something really cool and really interesting and really introspective. And they finally did what I wanted them to do with the first season, which is where they started to get into the other characters. They started to flesh them out and explore them. They started to get like even more into Carmi's motivation. The first season ends with Carmi, that being Jeremy Allen White's character, kind of having this big revelation where he's kind of like getting deep into his soul at this meeting, basically trying to figure out his motivation for why he wanted to take over his brother's sandwich shop. And then at the end of season 1, they kind of get a Hail Mary when they discover all this money that Michael had hidden away, and they finally use it to open up this fine dining establishment that he's wanted to do for a long time. And season 2 is kind of about the construction of that fine dining establishment now that they're gonna entitled The Bear, and while also kind of giving us some more flashback and context to some of the characters as well. So going into season 3, obviously, there's a lot of expectations on the table after season 2, especially after those middle 2 episodes of season 2. And what I'll say about season 3, just off the bat, before we get into the nitty gritty, is that this is definitely a more sad season than the last season for sure. Last season felt like a really like upbeat season. Like, okay, the characters, they're finally all on the same page. There's still that normal level of chaos that we're used to, but it feels like they're working towards something. It feels like they're actually building themselves towards something. And this season, they got it. They got the restaurant. They got it up and running, but after the events of last season, where Carmi locked himself in the walk-in freezer and kind of went on that little mini rant, yeah, this season is definitely setting us up for another little bit of a decline and kind of, what we love from our anti-heroes, where Carmi is possibly starting to become a villain. We don't know. So what were your overall thoughts on season 3?
I feel like this happens with a lot of shows where the first season they lay the groundwork, and then the second season is like a big improvement that they can build on it, and then maybe the third season, at least for me, isn't quite as strong, but it's close. Uh, but regardless, yes, you mentioned it's more sad, it's more melancholy, if you will, not as chaotic. I really like the chaos. Uh, but that's part of the beauty of the show, is that where you can have an entire episode just focused on one side character, and it's still just as good as the rest of the show. Like, I don't know many shows that do that. Like, the first one that comes to mind is the Lost Sister in Stranger Things, but that's just a completely separate thing. Like the episode that Ayo Edibiri directed in this one, focused on
Yes.
Tina. That was
Yes,
like one of my
napkins.
favorite episodes.
That's I as soon as I saw, I'm like, this is gonna be the best episode of the season for sure. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. You're right. It's not as strong as season 2, but season 2 like was such a force of nature to be reckoned with, I would say. This season, what I liked about this season is it did what most great shows do well, which is it continued the story in the most natural way. Carmen is now like a complete control freak. He wants to run everything. He's kind of doing exactly what was done to him in training. He's changing the menu every day. He's burning through finances. And you can see that like a little bit of that chaos that the characters were trying to escape from the original Chicago beef when he was running it, it's kind of coming back a little bit. And you start to see that and its influence on the other characters as well. It's a stressful season. They're all kind of dealing with a lot of stress right now. Richie's dealing with stress. Sugar, their sister, is going through stress. She's about to have a baby, literally, as we see. And of course, everybody else is trying to keep up the steam. Sydney's going through a lot as well. Sydney gets a pretty big offer later on throughout this season, ultimately. And even with the first episode, which is pretty much just like I call a greatest hits album, where it's basically just Carmen and flashbacks to other and better moments in his life in order to kind of contrast with the rest of what he's going to be doing this season. Like I said, it's a lot more of an intense season and kind of a downer. But like at the same time, the thing that I really came to appreciate about this season is, even more so than the last one, I feel like this season was all about finding the nice moments in between the chaos and the sweet moments. And I feel like a lot of characters this season that were pretty rough around the edges in the last season, they were really having like, a nice, more open moment. You obviously saw that with Sugar's reconnection with her mom, portrayed by Jamie Lee Curtis. Oliver Platt, what's it called? Uncle's, I can't remember his name, Cicero's,
guy from 2012.
Exactly.
That's how I know him.
Yeah, Oliver Platt started to soften up a bit. Ultimately, the napkins episode where we finally got Tina's backstory, was absolutely heartbreaking, but also like so joy. Like there were like this is the first show probably this whole year that just made me go from just feeling absolutely depressed. Like I watched the first 3 episodes on the night that it dropped on Wednesday, and I'm like, I feel like I need to take a cold shower. Like I just feel miserable, especially after that nightmare Doors episode where it just showed them like the whole episode is just them running the restaurant night after night after night. You just feel the exhaustion that comes from it. That's the thing that really sets the show apart, is the show does such a good job of blending the chaotic nature of cooking but also like kind of in a way like making a greater overall statement about those types of jobs and like what it is that motivates people to go through them. Because you're right, it is chaotic. It is, frankly, it is pretty miserable. And like, it really does take a very specific type of person to be able to do that ultimately. But in a way, it's also, I feel like, emblematic of our society where we're in right now, where everybody is working nonstop 24/7. It feels like nobody has a personal life anymore. So it feels like this show is kind of made for people like us. It's like the last like prestige show that's actually made for regular people. Whereas it feels like every other prestige show is being hijacked now by the elite in order to just like distract us from the real world problems. This one is like all about like regular everyday people's struggles ultimately. And
yeah, and they kind of mentioned that in like the 10th episode where they're at the restaurant like talking about why they like doing this, and it goes back to the Forks episode in the last season, which is probably the greatest episode in television history.
Yeah,
one of
them. Yeah, one of them indeed. I couldn't agree more. It's a show that's made for the little people, which is why it is so special, which is why it has gone on so much. Christopher Storer and Joanna Callow, these 2 creators. Also, props to them for the turnaround time as well. The fact that they're able to shoot and edit these so quickly. So the fact that this is like the only show, I think, in the last 5 years, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about I don't remember what show we were talking about, but how the fact that this is the only show, it feels like in recent memory, that's put out a new season around the same time every year. I can't think of another show recently that's done that, honestly, that wasn't like cut off because of COVID or had to be delayed because of the strikes or rising production values and more expensive stars and everything. The show is like, it's an old-fashioned show. It's had a relatively, not lesser known, but like, kind of on the up and up cast. It's kind of small in nature. They don't have a lot of locations, but the cinematography and editing and shooting style of it is so well done. And it's a show that's made on actors and good characters, and that we get to know more over the course of a period of time, and that we get to fall in love with ultimately, and see kind of their struggles ultimately day to day, and you get to struggle with them, and you get to relate to them ultimately. Like the thing that makes Tina's struggle so relatable is the fact that is what so many people find themselves in the job world and job applications, when she's going to various and different assorted places, getting denied over and over again, and the whole episode that we spent with Sugar when she's having that baby, it's like, and her like reconnecting with her mother that way, and like her mother's not apologizing for all the shit that she put them through for their lives growing up, but it's all about how and I'm Richie. I haven't even get to talk about Richie, who was the freaking revelation of this entire show. Eben Moss Backrack, a character actor who's been acting for years, been on a ton of shows, ton of movies, what's it called? Girls, and then the first season of The Punisher are probably the two most notable ones. Obviously, the first instance of him and Bernthal working together. And then obviously he gets this around the same time that he has like a couple episode stint on Andor, but he wins the Emmy for this show for the first season, very rightfully so. That's the other thing too. Also, the show was released in summer of 2022, and then it wins the Emmy for comedy, and also winning for Jeremy Allen White, Eben Moss Backrack, and Iowa Debris. As far as whether the show actually qualifies as a comedy or not, that remains to be seen. But
I think it's an episode runtime thing. That's what I heard.
It's an episode runtime.
That's why Barry was still always
right. But if that's the case, they need to retitle them from drama and comedy to hour long and half hour long. That's what they need to do, because you're right. Because even Succession doesn't really qualify as a full on drama at points. Like Succession has a lot of elements, has a lot of sitcom elements that they incorporated, versus this and Barry have a lot more dramatic elements in it too. But you're right, because they do still the fact that they still compete with traditional comedies, it kind of has become a little bit of a Golden Globe situation. So if that's the case, I really do think they need to retitle it to hour long and half hour long ultimately, if that's going to be the case going forward. But as far as Richie goes, right? Like, I mean, talk about a character that had one of the greatest turnarounds. I mean, you talked about the Forks episode being one of the greatest episodes of TV in recent memory. I'm inclined to agree with you on that, because I've never seen an episode of TV that managed to actually make me like care about a Taylor Swift song being used as a background, and actually like one of the best emotional arcs that I've seen recently. And you even saw shades of that continue this season as well with some of the cameos. I mean, talk about Richie for a second. Just what a revelation that character is.
Yeah, Richie is definitely my favorite character from his many feuds with Carmi. Like that will never get old. That's just that's a staple of the show. And his rebranded self, he wears suits now. He's always wearing a suit in every scene this episode, I feel. He's going for a more authoritative position in the new rebranded Bear. And his relationship with his ex-wife is quite interesting. Like, that's an interesting angle to look at it. As a child of divorce myself, that's just kind of a different perspective on things. So I appreciate seeing that. And as you mentioned, he's just a fantastic actor. I still need to watch Andor. No, not Andor. The Punisher.
Yeah. Just the first, just the first season for sure. The second season, it's all right. But Eben Moss Backrack not being there, he's such a crucial part of that first season. Ultimately,
can we mention Bernthal? He was way too cool, so they had to kill him off before the show even started.
I'm building to him, and kind of like how he is the secret seed sealer of this. Iowa Debris as well, like I said, as the kind of this being her really big breakout, her really big thing that she had been an improv and a stand-up comic before this. Now, obviously, unfortunately, kind of as a result of her success in the show, she has unfortunately, I think, become a little bit too overexposed, considering that I think that she was the most watched actor that I saw in like 5 different things last year, between The Bear, the Ninja Turtles movie, Theater Camp, Bottoms, and one other thing that I saw her in. And now this year she's also in Inside Out 2 as well. She's become very, very marketable, but her role as Sydney has been one that I've definitely grown more used to. The first season, I definitely wasn't sure kind of what the point of her character was, and I really wasn't sure if I liked her, and I kind of did classify her a little bit as a diversity insert, but I've definitely grown more warmed up to her character over time, ultimately, and kind of her relationship, her back and forth with Carmi, how they develop this mutual respect for each other, and the fact of how, what I really like is how, where they previously thought they had the same goal, now that may have gotten a little bit construed ultimately, and I know that they're desperate for a star for the Bear, but ultimately I think you're starting to see like her kind of question to be like, okay, is this what I really want? And especially with them introducing her dad as well in the last season, portrayed by Robert Townsend, what's it called, Blank Man himself, ultimately, or Meteor Man, which of the two, I can't remember, I thought was just absolutely phenomenal. Love that relationship there. Oh man. And Marcus too, as well. I completely forgot to mention him. We talked about Tina as well. Marcus as well, being another kind of scene stealer that was in the first season as the pastry chef, develops this relationship with Sydney, and then in last season as this ultimately heartbreaking arc where he gets to actually like go outside the country. He travels to Copenhagen, meets up with Will Poulter's Luca, gets to cook with him for a little bit, and then unfortunately, right on the opening night of The Bear, his mom dies, and now he's got to deal with that throughout this season. Like I said, it's the characters are really they're I'm not going to say they're at their lowest, but they're all kind of on the up and up, ultimately, they're trying to ultimately get past everything. I think the fishes episode also, which we have not mentioned yet from last season as well, having a big means of contributing kind of to the characters' all inner trauma, where the fishes episode, which we got midway through last season, which was a flashback to a typical Christmas at the Berzatos, where we get all the cousins and everything. It reminded me very much of like, the Italian dinners that we would have where just everything was chaos. Everybody was just yelling at each other, talking over each other, and it all happens around food, where we got no less than 6 or 7 big name actors that just popped up out of nowhere. Obviously the big rumor was that with the ending of Better Call Saul, Bob Odenkirk would be joining the show, but they didn't reveal to what capacity he would be. And we got Bob Odenkirk as Uncle Lee, who may or may not be dating their mother. Jamie Lee Curtis as their mother, Donna. We get the return of John Bernthal as Mikey, Carmen and Sugar's deceased older brother, but who dies before the events of the series. In addition to Richie and Cicero and the Fact brothers, we've also get John Mulaney and Sarah Paulson, as well as 2 of the cousins who are who have been since living in New York, and Jillian Jacobs as Richie's then wife, now ex-wife. And you get all of these cameos in that season. That's not even to mention we get Olivia Colman herself, one of like the 5 best working actresses as Chef Terry, who Richie goes to train under in the Forks episode as well. And you kind of get all this. I think that's the moment when everybody realized, oh, this is like the new It show. Like when you can get like that amount of talent who can all show up just for like one episode, and it goes the way that it goes ultimately. And we get a couple of new star player celebrity inserts here as well. Certain that I was not expecting. I think the biggest one ultimately was John Cena when he just comes in as the third Fact brother out of nowhere. And I'm just like, wait, what? That one was like, it takes a lot to throw me for a loop and surprise me, especially in the age of the internet where nothing is a surprise or a secret anymore. But that one, I was like, whoa, like John Cena, and he just blends in seamlessly. That's what I love about the show so much, is that it can take the biggest celebrity / star / actor. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in freaking Al Pacino in the next season. Like at this point, like no holds are barred at this point.
As like an investor or something.
It wouldn't surprise me.
This is the Bear.
Yeah, it's like, so this is the Bear, huh? I don't know. It seems kind of a little chaotic for my taste, but no, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they do that.
And Josh Hartnett, like 2 episodes
Josh Hartnett
earlier,
too, on the comeback trail, continuing.
He's in one scene.
One scene, literally, and I'm just like, how are they doing this? And also, this is a little bit of more of a sneaky one as well, but Brian Koppelman, the creator of Billions and the writer of Rounders, also cameos in this as well. He's been on the rewatchables frequently as Cicero's right-hand man, Computer, who they literally just call him that. I thought that was great. I didn't even recognize him. I'm like, but I recognized the voice instantly because I've heard him on so many podcasts. I'm like, oh my god, is that Brian Koppelman? What the hell? So yeah, so the show's ability to seamlessly blend in big name celebrities. You get Olivia Colman back, who gives one of the simultaneously best and most tear-jerking monologues I've seen in anything recently. We also haven't mentioned Joel McHale. We're gonna get to him. Jeff Winger himself from Community. But let's talk about Bernthal, man. And it's kind of weird because in a show that really only features him about once a season, how once again demonstrated that Bernthal really is the end-all be-all, possibly the best working actor right now in Hollywood, in the sense of where he just comes in for one sequence. He never does more than like 10 minutes of screen time in anything and just completely steals every single scene. He's been doing this for like 10 or 15 years now, honestly, really since his breakout in The Walking Dead. And yeah, just his role as Michael in the show as kind of like this overarching saint-like figure who unfortunately has passed before the events of the show, but we always get these awesome flashbacks of him and kind of how he was like this beacon of warmth that everybody kind of gravitated around, and the role that he played in everybody's lives ultimately, especially Carmen's, and how he's such a big influence on Carmen and why Carmen chooses to come back and take over his restaurant after his passing, unfortunately. I mean, we got it in episode 6 of season 1, which was, I believe, his first introduction. And when he comes in and I'm like, oh, John Bernthal's in this, I'm like, okay, I need to keep watching this ultimately. Because at that point, I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to keep going with this. I don't know if the show's really for me, ultimately. But then Bernthal comes in and I'm like, okay, it's Bernthal. It's required viewing now, ultimately. And then season 2, with the Fishes episode where he's going back and forth with Uncle Lee, and just that brilliant moment of tension building where he's just chucking the forks at him. Just we get more
one of the great memes.
Yes,
since
one of the great memes. The Bernthal scream. We get the Bernthal scream that we are so familiar with ultimately. But this season, oh man, I mean, how great was that Napkins episode? First of all, just the framing as well, where it's him, Eben, and Fak yelling at each other about the video game, and you see Tina crying in the forefront, which was so brilliant, where sometimes when you have something happening simultaneously in the forefront of the frame and the back of the frame, I sometimes get a little distracted and focus on one thing, but I noticed Tina crying, and then kind of their reaction to it, and then when Berthel comes over and starts talking to her, it makes for like, oh, just one of the best moments of television easily so far this year.
It's like you're not even watching a show anymore. It's just two real people talking. Like that's just how good the writing excels in those moments. Like, and I'm sure the actors add their little mannerisms and whatnot. Like of course they do. But just to come up with that and like you said, put it out yearly. Like they almost shot it back to back with season 4, but I guess the strike probably got in the
scheduling
way.
conflicts and probably the strike. Yeah,
but I'm sure they'll get a turnaround quick enough before everyone else is too famous from this show.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bernthal, he's not there a lot, but he's just the MVP whenever he is.
He really is.
Like,
he really is. And like that moment, there's just something about like the way that him and Tina were talking in that episode where, you know, they're kind of both comparing everything. And Berthel's like, yeah, this job, most of the time it sucks. But at the same time, it's like, I have the best time here. I have the best time here. I love it. I love these fucking people. They're all crazy. They're all psychotic. But there's something about just the realness that working in a restaurant just brings out of you. And the fact that, you know, it ultimately goes to him like being, it continues with, again, he's a little bit more of a saint-like figure. He's a little bit more of an archetype rather than a real character. But again, it's just Bernthal just brings that authenticity to it that just really, again, like the fact that when he offers Tina the job, you know, and it's just at that moment, you understand now why Tina has never left and why Tina has been there ever since. Because look, everybody works 1.5 million different jobs where you're just a number on a line, where you're just treated as another cog in the machine. It's very rare when you get that job where you actually feel like you're working, not just with your peers, but where you feel like you're part of a family. And like I said, in a time period where actually being able to have a real family is becoming much more and much more and much more of a financial hardship, and more people just getting motivated to just stick it to themselves and, you know, just continue with the grind. Having that family unit, in whether that's in the workplace setting or whether that's in the real world setting, it's more important than ever. Ultimately, it really is more important than ever. And the fact that we can still get moments like that, even if it is very brief, I think it's beyond crucial and important. And I think that's why that moment rings so true and is so emotionally wrenching and touching. And I think that's what makes that episode ultimately. And it's kind of the defining moment of the show. Now, the finale as well. I think that I like I said, I think if we're talking about 2 episodes from this season, it's the Napkins episode and it's the finale. Like tomorrow, I think is what it's called. Where, you know, what's called 1 episode ago, Cicero's telling Carmi that if they don't get a positive review, then he might have to pull out of the restaurant, ultimately pull the funding. Because like I said, Carmen has been kind of burning through the budget in an attempt to make a new menu every day, which I'm like, first of all, like the minute that you say that, it's like, bro, you finally got this working. Now you are, and I'm like, now you are the reason as to why everything is falling apart.
Even me, I know how to cook 3 things. I'm like, Dude, that's a bit
It's
extreme.
It's too much. Like, and you see it. You see the stress that it's putting on everybody else, and poor Ibra having to work that sandwich window by himself, and then they ultimately get the two other guys that used
There's
to work.
some good looking sandwiches though.
Oh man, that's the problem is I'm like, man, it really sucks that I love food so much because it's impossible for me to watch the show without getting hungry. And just like the way that he makes each of those dishes look so artistic, and I'm just like, I need to learn how.
See, I don't like the artistic dishes. There's like nothing on there. Like, give me the sandwich. There is nothing on there,
but you can tell that like there's something that you can tell that like, okay, there's something in there, especially when they mention Wagyu steak. I'm like, oh, as somebody who's had Wagyu steak before, I'm like, oh man, that's you don't mess around with that. But so. And then ultimately they get the very tragic news that Chef Terry's restaurant, Chef Terry being portrayed by Olivia Colman, where Carmi trained back in the day and where Richie went to train in the Forks episode, she's closing a restaurant ultimately. And it's this kind of brief like pause in everybody's lives where Carmi, Richie, and Sydney go and, they reunite with Luca, with Will Poulter's character. Richie gets to reunite with some of the staff that he was working with as they do this last final meal at this restaurant where you have all of these incredible professional chefs coming. You even get a cameo of one very professional chef, I can't remember his name, and another flashback at the beginning of that episode telling Carmi how to properly like cook a chicken and something in kind of this the step process. And it's just like, those moments of sympathy that you get from bosses when you're like, especially when you're being trained by like some of the best when that comes, especially in your first week. And just moments like that I think are just so what's it called? So real, but so awesome because, what's it called? Oh my God, my brain is blanking out right now because it's saying so much with saying so little. And I think that's another part of the reason why the show works so well is it's a show that works primarily on action and showing you, not telling you everything. So many shows are dependent on dialogue and getting you through loads of exposition. And the thing that I've really liked about the last couple of great shows that we've gotten, this, Succession, Barry, Ted Lasso, Reservation Dogs, is they have all become Slow Horses. They have all become so much more cinematic in the sense of really demonstrating action through action and not a lot of dialogue, which is what shows have been dependent on so much on the past. And it's such a beautiful cathartic moment for Richie kind of, getting to say goodbye to the thing that really helped him improve as a person ultimately, and he's going through a tough time as well, debating whether he's going to his ex-wife's new wedding, which as we probably both know, that's a pretty painful thing. That's a very, very, very painful thing, and as much as I love Julie Jacobs and, Josh Hartnett coming in and being revealed to be her new boo, it's like, that's tough for Richie, especially, seeing his relationship that he has with his daughter, who he loves very much. And so now he's got to say goodbye to this other thing that really, really helped him improve and really, helped turn him into the person that he is. And then you've got, and then you've got obviously Carmen's confrontation with ultimately one of his own personal demons that he was battling. We get flashbacks to his training in New York with Joel McHale, or as I call him, the chef from hell, who just absolutely belittled him and psychologically kind of destroyed him and now has kind of turned him into him, and it's kind of when he finally confronts him, we get a little bit of a Terrence Fletcher syndrome, what I call, J.K. Simmons' character from Whiplash, where he's like, listen, you were a mediocre chef when I met you. I made you great. And he's like, you ruined my life. You gave me ulcers and made it impossible for me to actually like not enjoy things. And Joel McHale's only confirmation is you're welcome. And it's kind of one of those like, oh man, like, were you expecting
I enjoyed that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great encounter for sure, but
I mean, I have not watched Community yet. I know you will scold me for that eternally, but Lost first, okay?
Lost first.
But no, I really enjoyed that that confrontation towards the end. There's a nice payoff to the many flashbacks we've had. Still a lot of payoffs to be had in the coming seasons, I'm sure, but that was a highlight of that last episode for me.
Yeah, that was a highlight. I really, really enjoyed that one. I enjoyed Sydney's moment bonding with Luca. That's the thing. We didn't get as many of the returning celebrities, but the fact that they brought back Poulter, they brought back Coleman, and they brought back Mulaney for all of 5 seconds in some of the flashback montages in episode 1, and they brought back Jamie Lee Curtis. So I like the how they're continuing to pick and choose with certain of the big name celebrity inserts, but also with Sydney as well, and how that impacts her, where she gets an offer from this other guy, this Adam Shapiro guy, in order to potentially go and work for his place that he's starting up. It's for a higher raise, it's for insurance benefits, and it's definitely a much more calm or chaotic thing. And the other thing too that I love about this final episode of this season is that it's kind of an indictment on on the entire way that Carmi's been running the restaurant, which is where they're kind of the whole thing. They're like, yeah, it's like, we're tired of the dysfunctionality. You know, the whole point of the kitchen is it's supposed to be a calm place among friends, ultimately, you know, where you're kind of bonding over this, but also how that factors into Chef Terry's final monologue, where she's like, yeah, I did this for a while and I loved every minute of it, but now it's time for me to step back and actually have a life. I've done what I can do with this. And it's just the way that she enunciates it. It's like, it might be the best Olivia Colman has ever been in anything. And this is somebody who has already won an Oscar and it will more than likely win an Emmy when the guest nominations are announced for this past year, which of course will be for season 2 because of the way that the Emmys are announced. And yeah, there was something like
genius by them, by the way. Like all the chat is about the next season, but they're actually nominated for the
it's pretty
previous
smart,
season.
honestly. It's very, very smart, kind of how they do that, because you remember,
and all the other shows are getting mad because like, hey guys, is this really a comedy?
Yep. Because season 2 was the same thing, where season 1 was getting all those nominations and wins when season 2 had only dropped a couple months before. Now, granted, we obviously know because of the delayed Emmys, because of the strikes and everything, but let's face it, even if the Emmys had been, or the Bear still would have won all those Emmys. So yeah, it's definitely setting us up for a 4th season that will definitely be interesting. But with that being said, I have a big, bold claim and prediction that I have made, and I think it goes in line with a couple of other seasons. So Barry ended with 4 seasons. Succession ended with 4 seasons. Ted Lasso only ended with 3. I think the next season of The Bear, season 4, will be the last season. I don't think that they should do another season after season 4. I think season 4 would be the perfect way to wrap things up as how they've been set up for the first 3 seasons. We see kind of what's happening with The Boys, with shows that are extending past 3-4 seasons. There's a lot of excess filler in that I don't think The Bear would be right for. So yeah, I think that unless they pull off some crazy twist that would require them to do a 5th season, which I don't think they will, I think next season is going to be the last season ultimately, and I think it's going to go out on a complete bang ultimately. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this was kind of tough to call because I feel like it could end at 4. But it could also go to like 6. I really don't know.
It's the Succession thing, and it's ultimately going to be up to the creators, as far as similar to what Jesse Armstrong wanted to do with Succession, whether they want to keep dragging it on and keep that consistent level of quality, but risk losing it, or if they want to end it on like the highest of high notes, you know. And if you ask me, given the trajectory of TV these last couple of years, I think that it would be in their best interest to end it next season. Ultimately, I think that would be the best way to end everything, because obviously, yes, there are still a few lingering, overlaying storylines. Carmi still has to make up with both Claire, who we didn't talk about at all, Molly Gordon's character, who we were introduced to last season as Carmi's, kind of, school, childhood crush, who we started to get closer to last season, then ultimately chased her away by kind of in his rant, basically kind of saying that she was a distraction. And we got the Fact brothers attempted to get her back in Carmi's good graces this year, but Carmi has yet to kind of polish things up with her. It still feels like there's some unresolved thing with Michael, especially when we got at Michael's funeral, famously, he did not show up. We still have the fate of ultimately of the Bear when in the final moments of the season, we get the reveal that it's revealed to be mixed. So it's not bad, it's not good, but it's still not what Carmi wanted. We still have Sydney's decision-making as far as that goes. We have to see if Richie is going to go to the wedding. So we still have a lot of loose, overhanging story threads that do still need to be wrapped up, but I do still think that it's something that they can wrap up in 10 episodes in one more season. So that's my prediction. That's my
maybe
claim.
Longer episodes.
Possibly.
Like the last 3 were 40 minutes. Like most of them were 30, 35.
Yes.
So maybe if they were all 40, I think.
Yes.
Maybe.
But I think that's kind of what we're building towards. Is season 4 is going to ultimately be the last season. So with that being said, like I said, this is a little bit of a shorter one because this is going to be edited together with House of the Dragon and The Boys. So Luke, your final thoughts and star ratings on The Bear season 3.
My final thoughts: this is absolutely one of the best shows on TV right now. It's very easy to recommend. Like everyone enjoys it. It's short, and this 3rd season is just another example of that great consistency. Almost as good as season 2, which means that's a 4.5 stars out of 5 from me.
Yes, I would tend to agree. If the last season was 4.5 out of 5 stars for me, this season I bumped down to a 4. But it's still, again, it really was maintaining the solid consistency and momentum and build-up that the show has had throughout the course of its first 2 seasons. I love the characters and kind of their individual journeys that they were going on. I like kind of like the downward trajectory that they're all on. It's setting us up for a really, really baller 4th season. But again, this season is absolutely nothing to sleep on. It's, as of right now, it's in my top 5 of the year so far. We'll see if anything else comes in and bumps it out. But yeah, this one, as far as being another summer delight, and really a good cap off to the blockbuster TV month that has been June so far. Like I said, we still have 5 more episodes of House of the Dragon. We have 3 more episodes of The Boys, 3 more episodes of The Acolyte, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that The Bear has once again won the summer and won the summer TV event. And whoops, as I knock off my what's it called? My filter there. Yeah, this one, it's absolutely one of my favorites of the year, and I could not recommend it more. As if people aren't watching it enough to begin with already, this is one of the few shows that has sort of united the culture as well. So, yep, that's our thoughts on The Bear season 3. Luke, thank you once again for joining me. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube. The next video is in a very good development stage, a disaster movie tier list in honor of Twisters. Also, go watch A Quiet Place Day 1 because it's really great.
All right, it's that good, huh? Looking forward to that.
It's not that good. It's just a great time if you need something to go to.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to try and find time to see that sometime this week before I head upstate. I still have to watch that, and I have to watch the 3-hour-long Horizon Chapter 1. We'll see if and when I'm able to get to that. But yes, and of course, you guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. Be sure to follow, subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch. This episode will be available to stream on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow, as well as the recaps of House of the Dragon and The Boys from this past week. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week.